The FBI estimates there are between 25–50 active serial killers in the U.S. at any given time. What is not a fun fact? During World War II, the Japanese built a human testing facility in China, which has come to be known as Unit 731. This was worse than a lot of concentration camps, but the people involved were never punished because the U.S. granted them immunity and attempted to cover it up in exchange for access to their research. The Soviet Union attempted to try the people involved, and the U.S. called it communist propaganda. The test subjects involved prisoners, but also the homeless, the mentally disabled, and random Chinese civilians kidnapped from nearby towns, including pregnant women and infants. Vivisections, cutting a person open with a T-shaped cut, were regularly performed, usually without anesthesia. Patients' limbs were randomly removed and improperly reattached to see what would happen, and internal organs were also randomly taken. All without anesthesia, of course. Prisoners were also injected with STDs, mainly syphilis, and then forced at gunpoint to ARP other prisoners to spread the disease. Some of these prisoners included pregnant women, in which case they would either be vivisected live and have their fetuses removed, or the syphilis-riddled babies would be born and eventually killed. They also participated in biological warfare in several cities, usually by infecting fleas with paratyphoid and releasing them. They tested any and all sorts of weapons on the prisoners, notably grenades and chemical bombs. They also stuck people in pressure chambers until their eyeballs popped, spun people in centrifuges until they died, burned them alive, stuck people in gas chambers, injected them with random substances, and froze their limbs before breaking them off. Most of the experiments had no practical application, and were done purely out of sadism. The Japanese government didn't officially admit to this until 2003, and the US still actively denies it. So yeah, have fun thinking about this. For more horrific war crimes committed by the Japanese, consider reading about the ARP of Nanking. Edit. When I got a notification that one of my comments was given the Wholesome Award, I gotta say I really didn't expect it to be this one. A certain type of anglerfish reproduce via the male burrowing into the side of the female, eventually fusing. The male life is lost in the process. The reason you're supposed to contact a doctor if you have an erection lasting longer than 4 hours is because prolonged priapism can lead to gangrene of the DCK. Blood goes in, deoxygenates, but can't leave, so there's no way for fresh oxygenated blood to come in, causing the tissue to turn black and die. Don't worry, though. This can be treated by using a big syringe to suck the trapped blood out. There are 8 unaccounted for American nukes and literally an unknown quantity of missing Soviet nukes that range all the way from warheads to suitcase bombs. There is a mysterious illness called the sweating sickness that hit in multiple small epidemics in the early modern era. It was incredibly contagious and massively deadly, with about a 50% average death rate, but it could be higher. It began with an ominous sense of apprehension, followed by severe pains in the neck and giddiness. They then abruptly stopped and switched to heavy sweating, headaches and delirium. Finally, the person was hit with an extreme urge to sleep, and it was thought to be fatal if you fell to it. We know almost nothing about it, nothing about how it spread, how it was caused, only that if you got it you were either surviving or dead within 24 hours. There are horror stories of people leaving town on hunting trips and returning the same day to find almost everybody in the village dead, with only a few scattered survivors. The worst thing was, you did not gain immunity. You could live through the sweating sickness once, and then get it a few days later and die. Or live through it 2 or 3 times, and then get it and die. It was horrific, and we don't know why it disappeared and we don't know if it will ever return. The lemmings are not suicidal, and the documentary What Filmed It was actually showing lemmings getting thrown down a cliff because they needed the scene but couldn't make the animals do it. There is a genetic disease called FOP where your muscles and tissue turn to bone, often called human statue disease. Eventually people may have to decide whether they want to become frozen in a sitting or flat, standing position. Penguins are the HLL out of anything that looks vaguely penguin-like or doesn't move. In fact, it was so rampant that the 1913 Scott Antarctic expedition decided it was best not to bring it up so society wouldn't have to deal with the issue it would bring up. Scientists witnessed males having sex with other males and also with dead females, including several that had died the previous year. He also saw the Mesxuali coerce females and chicks and occasionally kill them. The scientists blamed this astonishing depravity on hooligan males and wrote down his observations in Greek so that only an educated gentleman would understand the horrors he had witnessed. In Australia there is a plant called the Gympie Gympie which has such a severe sting that horses who brush against it throw themselves off cliffs because they'd rather die than continue to experience the pain. Hi, I'm Coyote Peterson. Migraines and strokes carry a lot of the same symptoms, so if you suffer regular migraines you may not notice you're actually dying one day. Climbing Mount Everest has a 6.5% mortality rate. What's more harrowing is that if you die, you will most likely be left there. There's currently over 200 dead bodies on Everest that are irretrievable, and now serve as markers for other climbers. Not a bad place to eternally rest, but upsetting for those left behind who can't give you a proper burial. Rabies is terrifying. You can get it and not even know it from bats, which live across the globe. It might hit you right away, it might be in 3 years. But it doesn't matter because once symptoms set in, you're already dead. Genetics are brutal. There is such a strong drive to replicate DNA that it will drive animals to murder to remove competitors. This is only really seen in tournament species. Pair bonding species are totally different. There is a lot of altruism in pair bonding which is neato, but there is still a genetic struggle. In humans, the father contributes genes that pull sugar out of the mother's blood more quickly for the baby, while the mother contributes genes that slows that process down. The logic behind the father's genes, if you will, is I want this baby to be huge and strong, regardless of what happens to the mother, because this is my offspring. Who knows when I'll have another one. The mother, on the other hand, has a genetic logic like yeah, this is my offspring, but I'd like to have other offspring, so don't mess me up too much, please. Edit. I learned all of this from Robert Sapolsky and his free Stanford course on human behavioral biology on YouTube. Binge it now. It was once thought for birds, parrots, magpies, to learn to talk, you had to release their tongue. This was done by cutting their tongue completely or partly off, of course without any anesthesia or painkillers. The tongue release plays absolutely no role in the bird's ability to talk. Greifswald Nuclear Power Plant, 1976, the almost Chernobyl of East Germany. In short, due to a short circuit resulting in a fire, almost all coolant pumps failed. The NY Times says, a Chernobyl-scale nuclear disaster was prevented only when a single water pump in the emergency cooling system was able to draw off pressurized water heated to high temperature by the decay heat left in the reactor's core, thus preventing a meltdown. This incident became public with reunification in 1989. The image that most people have of blobfish is based on a misconception. People think that's what they look like all the time, but blobfish adapted to live in deep waters, which means the deeper you go, the more water pressure there is. Their bodies are not meaty like fish but more gelatinous because they adapted to the water pressure. If you accidentally pull them to higher levels but with less water pressure, their bodies don't handle it well. There's nothing keeping their bodies intact, so their bodies explode. Basically, every photo you've seen of a blobfish where they look big and pink and, of course, blobby is a photo of a dead blobfish. Merchandise and cartoons designed after what they look like dead. Hell, they're referred to as what they look like dead. During World War I, thousands of dogs were taken from families for the war effort, and when the war was over, most of them were just shot because it was cheaper than feeding them for the trip home and finding their homes. In countries that require you to opt into organ donation, fewer than 15% of people register. In the US, an opt-in country, 18 people die every day waiting for an organ transplant. Opt-out countries see over 90% of their population registered for organ donation. Edit. Glad this started a conversation. Sloths only have enough energy for their weekly toilet trip to the jungle floor. If the baby falls from their underside in the trees onto the floor, they choose to preserve their energy and leave it to be eaten. Urine was used for teeth whitening and bleaching of clothes in ancient Rome. Yes, they rinsed their mouth with human and animal urine. People with extreme scurvy start to have all of their old wounds open up. Everything with a scar is held together via an active process with collagen, and without vitamin C just sort of ... stop. Chronic wasting disease. Forgive me, I'm no expert, it's a prion disease. It's kind of like mad cow disease for deer. It's 100% fatal. The problem comes with the fact that prions cannot be destroyed. So the infected deer can urinate in the field, spreading this disease into the soil, then into the foods we eat. It's been shown to infect some primates as well. So the risk of human transmission must not be ignored. Learning that last night definitely kept me from sleeping soundly. EDA, I'm no expert on this by any means. So if you have relevant info to add or I need correcting, please do so. Edit 2. If you are concerned by the spread of chronic wasting disease and the potential it has to impact human health, I advise you all to reach out to your representatives and let them know that you want more federal funding invested to support the surveillance and research of CWD. It's not yet a public health crisis, and it might never become one, but we have the opportunity to prevent it from becoming one. Also shout out to you, Foot Through Indo, for educating me in regards to this. First responders are always at least minutes away, and you can die in seconds. We operate fast-moving death machines and are often separated from other operating them by nothing more than an agreement not to cross a yellow line that someone else painted. The glaciers of the Antarctica shelves have melted, and continue to melt, at so fast a rate that even if we enacted radical and worldwide climate change laws today, it's going to take hundreds of years to recover them to their pre-industrial levels. The FBI estimates there are between 25-50 active serial killers in the US at any given time. Did my dissertation on serial killers. The FBI's estimate is vastly low. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of serial killers living among us. Also, consider the fact that you only have to kill 3 people to be considered a serial killer. I use the word only with some irony. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more quality content. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions. Goodbye.